And welcome to this edition of Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co-host Ray Smith. Good morning, Ray. How are you?
Hey, I'm very good, Keith. How are you today?
I am good. I am good. And we've got a special guest with us today. And this is going to be a little bit different from the things we normally talk about it. So I'm excited about it. Ray, why don't you introduce our guest?
I'll be glad to. Not too long ago, just several weeks ago, I got a call from Katie Jett, as she normally does when she has a travel writer coming into town. She generally tries to schedule me to give some portion of the tour while they're in town. And I'm happy to do that. So, I've had several unique experiences with people coming to Oak Ridge for tours, not the least of which is the one that led to a round table in Vail, Colorado, with some of the most amazing people I've ever seen. So I'm always excited about what is it that's coming to Oak Ridge? What connection am I going to make this time? And I asked her that. I said, "What's unique about this one?" She said, "Well, Ray, he's a Russian." And I said, "Good, that's great. That'll be different. I'll be happy to learn about him. He's from Russia." So I met Alexei Dmitriev there, and we had a tour. And I was just delighted by his excitement about things that I could show him in Oak Ridge. One of the things that I remember uh, seemed to strike him so much was the International Friendship Bell. And I hope you'll talk a little bit about that while we're here today. But Alexei, why don't you introduce yourself and then start us off by talking about your visit to Oak Ridge, and then let's get into the complementary cities in Russia to the secret city of Oak Ridge here in East Tennessee. Okay?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your introduction, Ray. Thank you, Keith. So I guess I will start by saying that if not for the pandemic, I probably wouldn't make it to Oak Ridge this year. It was on my list, but when I couldn't go internationally, and that's what I normally do as a travel writer, I had to narrow down my choices, and that's when I remembered, okay, Oak Ridge, I wanted to go and check it out. So it was a trip that kind of happened quickly, but the idea was planned long before. Now, obviously, when I was talking to the tourism officials of Tennessee, of the state of Tennessee, I mentioned that this is my prime objective. Dollywood, uh, Oak Ridge, yes. And of course, it was tricky because everything was closed. But I'm so happy that Ray was there for me and opened the museum and took me around and showed me everything. And I had the best trip ever, had the best treatment ever. It was really, really, really wonderful. Thank you, Ray, for doing that. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. I was glad to do it.
And I must say that my 13-year-old daughter enjoyed it immensely, and looking at everything with a very different perspective than mine. She still had a lot of fun, and we were talking in the car about everything we saw on the way back. It was a great trip.
Good.
So I will start by saying that at this time and day in my age, I have been to what was a closed city in America, but I haven't been to one in Russia. And that is saying, as a side story, I'll tell you that when my father visited me here, maybe about 15, 17 years ago, we signed him up for a tour of Pentagon. And he just could not believe that he, a Russian citizen, could walk in the same corridors where five-star generals would have offices, that the doors in their offices were open. He could peek in and see, I don't know, a secretary or an assistant sitting in and all the regalia and everything. And he could like, can you take a picture of me in front of this office where it says like United States Air Force Command? The reason I'm saying all that is that America opens up its secrets and Russia doesn't. No matter how much it talks about openness, no matter how much it talks about its proud history, the secrets remain hidden and the closed cities in Russia are still closed. Not only for foreigners, that's where my father's surprise came from. He was a foreigner. He had to show his passport to get in the Pentagon. It was a Russian passport. But I can't go, now I'm an American, I can't go there, obviously, but Russian citizens cannot go there either. Before I go there, let me talk a little bit about myself. I was a student of Indian philosophy in what was called back then the Leningrad State University. Now, of course, Leningrad has been renamed back to St. Petersburg. And I couldn't get much of the Indian philosophy. I was getting a lot of Marxist-Leninist philosophy taught to me. So the idea came to me to approach it through learning Sanskrit and Indian languages to be able to read the texts myself. So I switched to the Oriental department, where I was a student for 4 years, and then the time came to send me to India. At that time, everybody who was learning a foreign language and reasonably being good at it would be targeted to work at some sort of propaganda outlet. So I guess they were kind of like slanting me towards working in the Progress Publishing House in Moscow, which would translate everything that they wanted to have translated into Indian languages. And so they sent me to India for a year as an exchange student to practice and get better in my living Indian languages. I was studying Dravidian languages like Tamil and Telugu, pretty rare. Not many people know about them, but there are 60 million Telugu speakers in the world. So it's a sizable language. So it's a sizable audience for propaganda at that time. And so I went to Moscow I checked the Progress Publishing House, and it wasn't anything that I thought I would want to do. That was before the trip to India. So in India, I realized that I don't want to go back to the Soviet Union. And at that time, India was very friendly with the Soviet Union. They were allies, and it was kind of risky to try to escape there. But I managed. I took care of myself by buying a foreign passport of a good, solid, neutral European country. I had my picture replaced, and I got out, ended up in Athens, and lived there, first in a refugee camp, then by myself, waiting for my visa to come to the United States. And
what year was that?
That was 1981, 82.
Okay, all right.
So that was nothing about perestroika was in the air. Things were pretty tough. I know that the Russian embassy commandeered a whole bunch of people to look for me all over the place. They put out an article in India Today magazine about me not escaping, but getting lost. So they were looking for help. Maybe Indians would help them find me. And really, it was kind of unpleasant because one morning I woke up and I saw my picture in the magazine, and I knew that for a few hundred rupees, I could be quickly turned in. That was when I decided, that's it, I have to get out and leave the country. But anyway, so a lot of my friends could not believe that I was able to pull this off, because they said, well, like, you were never trained in those things. How did you know where to go? How could you? So funnily enough, until my first trip back to Russia many years later, when it was already Russia and not the Soviet Union, when I managed to dispel their concerns, they believed that I was a plant, I was a planted spy. And, I was allowed to escape so I could be in the US and whatever. So we're talking about George Koval and things that will happen later.
Such a parallel, yes. Quite a parallel, yes. He was in the U.S. and then went back to Russia,
right,
and then came back to the U.S. So
right,
you've done something like him, okay?
Right. Well, I went one way. I did a few things. I tried to go back to the South Indian studies here. Then I decided that it was too academic for me. I got an MBA. I started working for a multinational corporation, luckily taking care of India, Pakistan, and South Asia, the area that I love, the area that I'm always willing to go to. And the company had a lot of success with me, because when I would come in, I would just start talking their language to them, eating their food, and sell a lot of stuff. They were willing to buy a lot of stuff from me. I could BS about cricket. I can still, I guess, do it better than about American football. And finally, after a few years there, I decided that, no, that's not what I want to do. And I became a travel writer, because I'm a humanity person, and I wanted to go back to something that I wanted to do. And that's what I've been doing since. Now it's the time for travel writing is tough for obvious reasons, but guess what? I got to Oak Ridge, and that was some sort of icing on the cake. I knew, and I know that this is the area that Russian audience would be very interested in, because, as I said, their own secrets are still secrets for them, and things are being published and things are opening up, but you always want to know what was it like on the other side? What did they do when we were doing this? What were they doing? To me, it is fascinating, and it was fascinating to see similarities, because if you think about it, Oak Ridge was the concept, I guess the Manhattan Project in general, was as close to a very centralized, very much government-controlled effort in a free country. So it was a mini episode of what 100% of the Soviet life was at that time, right? It was a miniature, if you understand what I'm trying to say, it was a miniature, dictatorial, authoritarian initiative in America. And that way it was interesting to me. I thought, like, okay, well, what was going on? So everything in the museum, Ray, that you showed me, I was processing through those lenses. Yeah. And from the propaganda posters, one-to-one, from the interior pictures showing the interior of places, it was so close to what I remember seeing back home. You know, the sparse, the, you know, very, very, not much decoration, very utilitarian spaces, because there was one objective in mind, and that's what everything was directed towards. And of course, the human stories would be something that would make it really interesting. But considering that it was COVID, I was still pretty satisfied with little vignettes that I could read under the pictures and see what the quotations, what people were saying. Amazing how the whole picture was kept away from 95 probably percent of the people who worked at Oak Ridge, and they only knew their part. Exactly the same thing was happening in Russia, except in the Soviet Union, except for people working and living in the secret cities. They knew that they were part of a big, you know, they're doing something for the socialism, they're doing something for the country, they're doing something. I was not sure that people doing this particular operation in Oak Ridge, like those ladies, I forgot the name for the English name, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the Calutron girls,
Right.
we call them.
Like, were they aware that this is for the military effort, this is for the victory, this is
Yeah,
for...
they did. They knew that what they were doing was to help win the war, and
Okay.
that was all they knew. But they did know that it was something military and something to help stop the killing and end the war.
So people working at the factories at the same time, let's say manufacturing airplanes, and people working in Oak Ridge, they had this one idea to win the war.
Yeah, they did. They called it war work.
Right.
You know, they wanted to do something that would be helpful toward winning the war.
Secret cities in the Soviet Union did not appear during the World War II. They appeared much later. So the war was over. And of course, the idea was not to win anything, because God forbid, Soviet Union, they would not want to take over the world, but to protect ourselves. So this, the working for the benefit of the Soviet Union meant that you were a protector of your own country and helping the country to get stronger and more resilient and be better protected.
And I guess to build the nuclear arsenal.
Right. But again, as a protection, as a,
right.
you know, they have theirs, we have ours.
Which is the same thing that happened in Oak Ridge after World War II. You know, it was
because, but that was Germans, right?
Yeah.
The idea was that it was Germans. That was an active enemy. We were fighting Germans. They were having this, so we're getting this. Yeah. Like on their tanks, the metal gets thicker, so we have to make ours thicker too, or make better bombs, right? 1947, when everything started with the first, I think the first closed cities appeared around 1949, maybe 1950s. The war was over. The Cold War was on. And
yes.
And another thing, Ray, you mentioned the bell, and I think deep inside I was really impressed by it, because to me it meant that we as Americans are aware of what effect the bomb towards which we worked in Oak Ridge had on the world and on Japan. And we're putting up this bell to commemorate that, and to, I wouldn't say to say we're sorry, but to say we're aware. We feel we know our responsibility. Nothing like this has happened in Russia about people who worked for the industry, for the atomic industry, people who worked in the closed cities, people who died during, a lot of people perished, even in the construction of closed cities, because they were built, most often they were built with gulag labor. They were built with prisoners' labor. And this acceptance of acceptance of history is very tough for Russia, of that part of history, of the camps, of secrecy, of that is still to be seen. That is still to happen, I guess. I hope. I mean, think about the submarine Kursk and everything that happened with it, and how it was covered up, and how the foreign international help was refused, and they do have one little monument for the crew, but only after a lot of pressure from the families of the people who died, of the sailors who died. And actually, Kursk started in Severomorsk. That's where the Navy base, where it was, where it came out from. It's part of the secret town of Severomorsk. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So, do you want me to ask? Do you want to ask me anything else before I start talking about Russian secret cities?
No, I think you've done a really good job of putting it into proper perspective, and it's good to hear your perception of what I believe is a recognition of a worldwide responsibility and a desire for peace that the bell represents. So I think you hit it right on target. Keith, you have any question?
No, it's just a comment, though. I think it's interesting that you said that the Russian secret cities started in the late 40s, 49, something like that. Ray, wasn't Oak Ridge open to the public in March of 1949?
Yes, that's
Yes.
exactly right.
It was open to the public.
Yeah, but remember, only the city.
Only the city.
Government sites were then, and today still are, protected from just any access.
Yeah.
So yes, the city's open, but not the government facility.
That's true. That is true.
So, okay, Alexei, now go ahead.
I mean, not to mention that aesthetically, the bell is very well done. It's just the form and the shape, not just the message, but the way it is presented. It's really impressive. I was really happy to be there.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Appreciate that.
So, okay, let me start by showing you a map of Russia that gives you an idea the extent to which secret cities are still reality of life there. Okay, let's see. I will share. Okay, what do I have here? So I'll try to and make it, where do I make it a slideshow? No. How do I change it to full screen?
Go up to view. And see.
Present.
Full screen.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, or present.
There you go.
Okay. So maybe that's not the best map, but it gives you an idea of concentration of those secret city sites. Not all of them are secret, not all of them are cities. Some of them are just settlements or smaller towns. But why I think the map is good to look at it and to start a conversation about secret cities in Russia is because it gives you an idea of the three main areas, three main industries. What makes it a secret city a secret? So where you see a sign like an atom with electrons, that is where the nuclear energy, nuclear research is, and you see them right here in this area above Kazakhstan, right in the Urals. Okay, where you see missiles, obviously this is where the strategic missile defense installations are. Where you see a rocket like this one, that would be where we have in Russia facilities for space launch and space research. These are also closed. And finally, where you see a little submarine, that is where the Navy secret facilities are. So some of them are small, some of them are bigger. The bigger ones would probably go to about 100,000 people, which makes it comparable to what Oak Ridge was, right? Oak Ridge was about what, 75,000?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. And for example, you see that there are like clusters. This is the Kola Peninsula. This is the northern fleet is based there. That's where Kursk was based, close to Norway. Obviously, there is one in Vladivostok. Vladivostok used to be a closed city until 1990 something, and just opened up relatively recently. The area around in the central Russia is also quite heavily, you realize that these are like enlargement part of the map that runs in gray here, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah. Just, so you can see how much of this is happening here and how much of the Navy bases are in this little spot right next to the Norwegian border. The area around Moscow in central Russia is also heavy because there is a lot of research going on, and I'm going to talk about it more. So that gives you an idea how much of the country. I mean, I wonder if there's a map of the United States available like that, but I haven't looked at it.
I will send you one.
Okay. So this is what it looks like, right? And you would be driving along a highway or a country road, and you would come across a sign like this. And it could be just that. It could be that there will be no road leading to a secret city or a secret settlement, or there would be another sign and there will be a roadblock. But here it says entrance for foreign citizens, but in many cases, it also means that it is not, that the Russian citizens cannot enter either unless you have a special permit or you have a stamp in your passport, because in Russia, we have internal passports. And usually it has a stamp of your residence. So if you're a resident of the city that is close to the general public, then of course you can come in, but your documents will be checked upon entering. one interesting characteristic is, again, because these cities were completely planned, um, there was a purpose for building them. They uh, come out as materialized idea of what an ideal socialist city would look like. I don't think that was the case with Oak Ridge in the United States. There was no idea, there was no concept of we're going to build the city of sun and have this utopian Campanella kind of settlement on earth. But I believe that in Russia, that was somewhat of a concept that we're going to build an ideal city. So in many ways, closed cities in Russia personify the urban, ideal urban settlement in the way of, in the eyes of these socialist architects, okay? They would be obviously placed like Oak Ridge in areas that are away from major highways or major cities, but close enough so that they could get people to come in to work for there, okay, from nearby areas. Also, they were, I wouldn't say they were satellite cities, but they would have a name which would have a number. So this is the city, this is a picture of Zheleznogorsk. This is what it is known now. Now it appeared on the map. You can look for Zheleznogorsk and find it on the map. But before 1992, when Yeltsin allowed, President Yeltsin that is, allowed many of those cities to appear on the map and get their names, they were known as mailboxes. So this was known, Zheleznogorsk was known as Krasnoyarsk 26, which means it was near a major city of Krasnoyarsk in Siberia, and it had a mail zip code, okay? So if you were to write a letter that I'm sure will be open and checked before it is given to the addressee, you would just write Krasnoyarsk 26 and then maybe a street and the apartment and the name, right? But it would not go to Krasnoyarsk. It would go to what is now known as Zheleznogorsk. So the whole city of Zheleznogorsk would have a zip code of 26. And for those who knew, that's what it was. That's how secret cities stayed secret. They were not on the map. They didn't have their own name. They had a zip code, a mailbox. Okay, so here it had also a quite, it was called Atomgrad, Atom City. It was called Sotsgorod, Socialist City at one point. And as you can see, it looks pretty organized and clean. One of the main advantages that attracted people to come and live there was that these cities were completely crime-free, like 100% crime-free. And the salaries were higher than the average. And what was also important, not the case in of Oak Ridge, I'm sure, but when there was so much of deficit of food, consumer goods, these cities were stocked pretty well. They did not have issues with supply. There was never a shortage of anything. They were given special treatment. Now, sooner or later, people living around it would come to realize that there is this utopian place on earth right next door, which gets everything that they don't. And they would try to settle the score with the locals, because the locals were equal, but still treated better. And when local people would come out on errands, on business trips, when they would come out of this bubble, they would often had confrontations with people living outside of the barbed wire or outside of the perimeter. And the funny thing that the inhabitants of the secret cities were at a disadvantage. They could not defend themselves in a physical altercation, because if they were found to be involved in something like a fight, they could be expelled. They would lose their secret city clearance or residence. They would lose this cushy job, and they would be expelled. They would have to leave. So they couldn't, you know, I read some accounts where they couldn't defend themselves, basically, for the fear of being accused in doing something, in breaking the law, and therefore losing their job. Okay.
Wow.
So here is another secret city. It's Znamensk. It is in the Astrakhan area. Astrakhan is a city at the northern part of the Caspian Sea. And that's where a major Soviet space rocket testing site is. It's a polygon for missile launchers. The famous dogs, Belka and Strelka, who were sent in space before Yuri Gagarin was sent, it happened from this launchings, from this launching pad next to this city. Again, you see how it looks almost idyllic, a lot of greenery, a lot of wide spaces, of course, not too many cars at that time. I'm pretty sure that this is quite a dated photo. Maybe it's like in the 90s or something, but that's what it looked like. Now,
let me ask a question. Do these cities still exist? I mean, are they still functional?
I'm going to, yes. Okay. The answer is yes. Okay. They may not look the same anymore. And okay, since you asked about it. So after the Soviet Union collapsed and perestroika took over, the cushiness of them started to fade away. They became less important because there was less money, less state money coming in to fund the research, and people started leaving. They started moving to real cities because they were also, once you stopped working at a secret facilities, I think there is a period where you cannot get out, or where you can't move freely. I mean, I'm not, obviously none of people living there could ever go abroad. Right. It was just like not thinkable. Mm-hmm. So once you stopped working after maybe 6 months or so, you could actually move around. You could go and relocate, let's say, to Moscow and find something else. But the real problem came when all those scientists involved in nuclear research, they became available. They started looking for a job. And it is known that a lot of them relocated to far out places where their expertise was used for nuclear research by other countries. I'm just not naming anything because I cannot speak with certainty where exactly they went. But it was extremely challenging for the Russian government to keep them in place, to keep them happy when secret cities started to decline. Some did. I'm not saying that all of them did, but some did. Certainly, the scale went down tremendously. Here's another one. It's the city of Ozersk. So this is, again, used to be known next to a big city of Chelyabinsk. Look at this. I mean, it's pretty big. It's not a small city. It was known as Chelyabinsk 40 or then Chelyabinsk 65. They gained the mail code. The problem with, I think the memorable thing about Ozersk is that it had a uranium enrichment plant that in 1957 had a major explosion. It was I think the reactor was overheated or something like that. It happened at night. The multi-ton lid blew up. People were not killed when it happened, but what started happening is that I'm not sure. The wind blew the radiation over a very, 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 very large area. I just want to make sure that this is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's the right one. Yeah, that's where it's called Kishtim disaster. If you're interested in looking at on a plant called Mayak. The area had about 270,000 inhabitants that was affected. The plume went very, very far. It was known to be the second worst nuclear disaster in Russia after Chernobyl. A lot of people were sick after that, and of course it was completely covered up. Nothing was known, and people were just relocated with no support. They were just like, they were told to leave. Their villages would be razed, and it was a major disaster that way.
Wow.
Of course, because it was sick, nothing could be said, right? This did not exist. How could we talk about a disaster somewhere that never was there, right?
When did this go? When was that become known? When did
this one, the Kishtim disaster was in 1957.
Right. And then when did it really become public knowledge outside of, the area, I guess?
Well, I would say 57. So we would have to wait at least until late 90s.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know if I have it on my slideshow, but there is, there was, I don't know, oh, maybe it was not this one, but there was polonium. Is polonium, does polonium happen when you deal with uranium or with, there was a funny joke, so maybe it was here that a guy managed to sneak out a jar with polonium, and he stored it at his apartment. And during some sort of radiation check, suddenly this apartment building started like
Wow.
zooming big time.
Yeah.
And they came in, and he said, I was just storing it, because I wasn't happy with my mother-in-law. That was my objective. I was keeping it polonium for my mother-in-law.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, to put a little funny spin on the whole business. This is a picture, idyllic, of course, of Sarov. Sarov was a major nuclear research, also center. And this one is, as you can see, it has Moscow 300. Arzamas 75, Arzamas 16. It's in the Nizhny Novgorod area, relatively close to Moscow, closer to Arzamas, which is a big city there. You can see that it had many names. And of course, Sarov is an old Russian city with a very prominent saint, Serafim Sarovsky, that came out of there. It has a monastery, and it was primarily known for the monastery. So I think it was funny how they put everything on the city's coat of arms. So they have a nuclear sign, and then they have a Russian Orthodox belfry there. It's all nicely intertwined together.
Wow.
Zagorsk 6 and Zagorsk 7, again, very traditionally historical Russian cities known for their monastery and monastic life, but also known as the place where when a group of there was an Indian delegation in the 60s that came to Russia, and they brought in smallpox with them. And I'm not sure quite how, but that was the beginning of the virus study in Zagorsk. So that Zagorsk is a place known for its virus research, and it is believed that the Russians could react to Ebola virus and vaccinate people very quickly in Africa because they already had the vaccine ready that was manufactured and researched in Zagorsk.
I wonder if that's where they did the research for the Sputnik 5 COVID.
Or that's where they, researched this Novichok that was used to poison Navalny. I'm not sure.
Exactly. One interesting thing this week, speaking of that, when they came out with saying that they had a vaccine for COVID, 5 months ago, nobody really believed them. And then just this week, our people went through all the data, results of the data, and it looks like it is actually very effective vaccine.
Right, that it works. COVID. Yes.
Yeah. So that's just a thought.
Yeah. Okay, well, this one is interesting. This one is a secret facility in the Crimea that was Russian, then it was Ukrainian, now it's back to Russia. Balaklava is a major submarine repair and building facility near Sebastopol on the Crimea southern coast. It was, I don't have a picture, but all of it was built inside a mountain. It was completely, you would not know. And the mountain, of course, just like in the James Bond movies, it had the underwater entry and exit, so they would come in, nobody would know that they're there, that they're being repaired, they come out. That was a major. Now this is one of the few that is open up. I used to vacation there, and I had no idea. I mean, I was really like 10, 15 kilometers away, had no idea what was going on underneath. Now they open it up and they made a Navy base museum there. So this is the area that people can visit today.
Wow.
This is a picture of Severomorsk, the city, the secret city on the Kola Peninsula near the Norwegian border, where Kursk submarine was based. It's actually not one city; it's a cluster of cities or towns or bases, and one of them had a major about 7 or 9 years ago. They had a major fire, and a lot of 1/3 of the northern fleet of Russia missiles went up in the air, and there was a radiation leak. A lot of scientists from Sarov went to Severomorsk to take care of it, or were working there, and they died in the accident. And there is a monument built to commemorate their efforts. So,
wow.
yeah, things. It's becoming less and less. It's less easy now to cover up things that happen like this now in the age of internet and phone texting. When people start phone texting that there's something going on, you can't keep the information covered. I mean, you think about it, that those closed cities, they didn't have internet, right? They had only phones. So there were no pictures. Everything was listened to. So of course now there is much less control over information. Information can travel freely.
And I would imagine that there's um, much less control from the Russian government on some of those things. I mean, just because from a practical standpoint, they they control it the best they can, but because life and culture has changed so much, it's much more difficult to do that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
This is the slide that I forgot to show you. It shows the plume, the radioactive
Mm.
plume from Kishtim. Kishtim is right where you see the Mayak factory. It's a German map. So that tells you there is a scale down below 100 kilometers. So it went to almost for 200 kilometers,
Wow.
160 miles or something, more than that.
Yeah.
That's the plume. Okay, and that is going back to that is to end on a funny anecdotal note that this was a creature found near Kishtim a few years after the accident, and of course, some people believe there was also a facility there where they would work on the extraterrestrials, and that was one of them. There are people who knew this person alive. A woman was actually sheltering it at one point, and then it just disappeared, and that's the only picture. Nobody knows where it is.
Wow.
Many people believe that this was most probably it was something like an aborted child of someone who was radiated, and these are the genetic mutations that
Mm.
occurred.
Wow.
Wow.
So again, looking at the cities, this may look like a typical classical Soviet city, but nevertheless, it is. It's also one of the northern cities that's abandoned. I'm sorry, that's closed. But it looks. This one doesn't have too much greenery.
Yeah.
A lot of snow.
Yeah.
So this is a little side story following my great trip to Oak Ridge.
Fantastic. Let's
There are a
touch.
total of 42. The remaining, there are 42 closed cities in Russia right now. 42.
Wow.
Wow.
Let's
Amazing.
talk a little bit before we wrap things up about the spy. You had mentioned that earlier.
Yes,
Name
George
real
Koval.
quick.
It is, of course, that's the second or third question I asked Ray. It's like, okay, was there any breach of security? Did they find anything? You can read about George Koval on the internet. There's a decent amount of information. I wanted to say something that may not be apparent. So people who spied for the Soviet Union in America were not doing it for monetary reasons. There was nothing really that the Soviets could offer them, right? They were doing it primarily because they believed that there was something ideologically that was wrong, that one country would have. We're talking about George Koval and Oak Ridge, that one country would have such a big advantage in terms of nuclear arms over the other, and they wanted to bring it to a certain level. Not the case of Russians who were spying for the West, where primarily either the promise of relocation to the West later on or monetary compensation was the case. So George Koval is remarkable because he was not caught. He was not like Rosenberg's. He escaped in the late 40s. And he lived in Russia until he died, I think, in 2006. And he opened up in his correspondence with an American scientist whom he knew before when he lived in the U.S. And from this correspondence, it appears that he was upset that his contribution was never awarded. Putin awarded him posthumous, but after he died, he gave him recognition. But the problem was that although he did work for the Soviet Union, once he relocated there, he was still considered a threat because he lived in America most of his life, and nobody knew whether he would actually damage the Soviet Union and maybe being a double agent. So he was always tarnished and could not really prosper, and couldn't his work after he returned to the Soviet Union, it was far less interesting that a man of his intellect and power would warrant.
Wow.
Yeah, a tragic story.
Yes,
Most spy stories are tragic stories.
Very true. Well, Alexei, thank you so much for the time you spent with us today and for giving us some unique insights into Russia's secret cities, and also for sharing with us the joy you had of getting to come to Oak Ridge. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's we've had some really interesting guests on, and I think you're right up there near the top for me. I thought this was fascinating. So
that's new information that not like it's new information for most people, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ray. Who do we have scheduled coming up in a couple of more weeks?
Well, we do. We've got Bill Carey, who is he has a website, the Tennessee History for Kids,
Okay.
and he'll be talking with us about a trip that he's planning for this summer to bring maybe as high as 50 people, I'm not sure, teachers from across the state. He's going to work to bring them to Oak Ridge. And Bill's got an interesting history himself, and doing a wonderful work for education on history across the state. And we'll have Bill with us next time.
All right, great. All right. Well, folks, thanks for watching Hidden History Stories from the Secret City, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye-bye.